Somewhere in the American Midwest, there are barns that still carry their names. Faded letters on weathered wood, old decals on a dusty hood, the ghost of a logo on a hand-painted sign. Oliver, Minneapolis-Moline, Cockshutt. If you grew up on a farm in the mid-20th century, those names meant something. They meant reliability, community, a way of life rooted in the land. Today, most people have never heard of them. This is the story of three of American agriculture's most important forgotten manufacturers, the tractors they built, the farmers who trusted them, and what happened when the machines outlasted the men who made them. The Oliver name goes back further than most people realize. In 1929, 4 companies merged to form the Oliver Farm Equipment Company, Hartpar of Charles City, Iowa. The Oliver Chilled Plow Works out of South Bend, Indiana. Nichols and Shepard, an American seeding machine company. It was a consolidation born of economic pressure, an attempt to compete in an increasingly crowded market. What emerged was something that outlasted its origins. The Oliver 70, introduced in 1935, was a revelation. It ran on a high-compression engine at a time when most farm tractors still burned kerosene. It was smoother, quieter, and more powerful than what farmers were used to. Its streamlined styling set it apart on any field. Through the 1940s and 1950s, Oliver built a reputation for engineering quality. The 88 series, introduced in 1947, became one of the most trusted row crop tractors in North American agriculture. Farmers passed them from father to son. Dealers built their livelihoods around them. Communities organized around Oliver dealerships the way small towns organized around a general store. But by the late 1950s, the competitive landscape was shifting. International Harvester and John Deere were growing rapidly, with distribution networks and advertising budgets that smaller manufacturers simply couldn't match. In 1960, Oliver was acquired by White Motor Corporation, a truck manufacturer from Cleveland that had little experience in farm equipment, but saw agricultural machinery as an opportunity for expansion. Under White, the Oliver brand continued for a time. New models were introduced through the 1960s, but the culture changed. Cost-cutting replaced craftsmanship. The decisions were made in boardrooms, not fields. By 1974, the Oliver name was retired. The tractors were rebadged as White Farm Equipment. One of American agriculture's most respected names simply ceased to exist. If Oliver was defined by dependability, Minneapolis-Moline was defined by vision. The company was formed in 1929, the same year as Oliver, through the merger of 3 Minnesota firms: Minneapolis Steel and Machinery, Minneapolis Threshing Machine Company, and Moline Implement Company. From the beginning, it carried the ambition of the upper Midwest, a region that had built its identity on hard winters, flat horizons, and the stubborn belief that things could be made better. Minneapolis-Moline tractors wore its distinctive color. The company called Prairie Gold, a warm yellow-orange that became instantly recognizable across the northern plains. It was a branding choice that also felt like a statement. These machines belonged to the land. In 1938, the company introduced something remarkable: the UDLX Comfort Tractor. At a time when tractor operators sat fully exposed to wind, rain, and dust, the UDLX offered an enclosed steel cab with a heater, a radio, and room for a passenger. It was designed so a farmer could drive from the field to town without changing vehicles. It was in many ways 50 years ahead of its time, but farmers of the late 1930s, still emerging from the Depression, weren't ready to pay for comfort. Only a few hundred were ever sold. The company continued building reliable, well-regarded machines through the post-war era. The NEM Series and Z Series tractors found loyal followings across the northern plains and into Canada. Farmers who ran Minneapolis-Moline equipment often stayed with it for decades, but the same forces that squeezed Oliver squeezed Minneapolis-Moline. In 1963, it was acquired by White Motor Corporation, the same company that would later absorb Oliver. By the late 1960s, the distinctive Prairie Gold paint was fading from new models. By 1974, the name was gone entirely, folded into the same White Farm Equipment rebadging that had consumed its rival. 2 brands, one corporate buyer, one quiet end. Not all of the forgotten brands came from the American Midwest. Cockshutt Farm Equipment was founded in Brantford, Ontario, in 1877, originally as a plow manufacturer. later expanding into full farm implement lines. By the mid-20th century, it had grown into Canada's most trusted domestic tractor brand. The Cockshutt 30, introduced in 1946, became the machine that defined the company. It was compact, versatile, and well-suited to the mixed grain and livestock farms that dominated eastern Canada and the northern plains. Canadian farmers trusted it the way their American counterparts trusted Oliver, not just because it worked, but because it was theirs. Cockshutt had a close relationship with Oliver for much of its history, reselling Oliver-built tractors under its own badge in some markets. But it maintained its own identity, its own engineering staff, and a fierce loyalty among the farming communities it served. In 1962, Cockshutt was acquired, first by a Canadian holding company, then ultimately passed along through a series of corporate transactions that ended, predictably, with White Motor Corporation. The Cockshutt name disappeared from new tractors in the early 1970s. For Canadian farmers who had grown up with the red and cream machines from Brantford, it was not merely a brand change. It was the end of something that had been part of the community for generations. The consolidation of farm equipment manufacturers in the 1960s and 70s was, in economic terms, a rational response to market pressure. Smaller brands couldn't achieve the scale of John Deere or International Harvester. Mergers offered survival, or at least survival of the machines, if not the names. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. When a brand disappeared, a dealer network went with it. Local mechanics who had spent careers learning a particular engine lost their trade. Farming families who had built brand loyalty across 3 generations found themselves starting over. The community structures that had organized around these dealerships, the credit lines, the service relationships, the simple familiarity of a name you trusted, dissolved quietly along with the brands themselves. The tractors themselves survived longer. Oliver 88s and Minneapolis-Moline Z tractors can still be found at shows and on small farms today, maintained by collectors and enthusiasts who understand what these machines represented. The iron lasted. The companies did not. There is something worth preserving in their memory, not just as objects, but as evidence of a time when the tools of agriculture carried with them the identity of the people and places that made them. Oliver, Minneapolis-Moline, Cockshutt. The names fade. The iron remains. If you found this video, there's a good chance you already know that history like this is worth keeping. Subscribe to Old Iron Tractor History, and we'll keep telling it.